And we're off to another year. So this is the first 2019 edition of my weekly update. Something which so far, actually, since I started it somewhere, I think in 2017, I'm yet to miss a week. I've had some late weeks, I've had some probably rather boring weeks, but I've yet to miss a week. So I'm going to try and keep that momentum throughout 2019 as well. Now, I am starting with something which I'm actually really happy to talk about, and something that's been in the works for years and years, and it's the last blog post I did last year. It's the one I pushed out on New Year's Eve, which is 10 personal financial lessons for technology professionals. Now, this whole thing is going to be quite different to my normal cyber thing discussion. And for those of you that have read the blog post, you'll know that it's very different to the normal thing. But by the same token, it's something which is very closely related to so many of the things that I've done over the years, through the years that people have been watching me on this video, watching me online and doing the conferencing things, and indeed for many years before that as well. And this is really more of a sort of personal development blog post. And I started writing this, it must have been 5 years ago. Like, it was well before I rolled over my blog to Ghost several years ago, because I had to grab it from like an old Microsoft Live Writer template. And I'm quite sure I was still in Sydney as well, and I was still in a corporate life. And I kind of kept adding bits and pieces to this as time went by, expecting that at some point I'll get to a stage where I feel that it's a good time to actually write it. Now that stage came a few weeks ago. In fact, really it only came a couple of weeks ago. It really came Christmas Eve. I tweeted, and of course this is in the blog post, and I appreciate that these weekly updates can be a bit of a narrative of the blog post, but I hope that they sort of add a little bit more personality and a little bit more insight into what I was thinking. But on Christmas Eve, I tweeted about the new car that we bought, the car that I spoke about last week, I think it was. And I was very excited about that. And I had a lot of really encouraging feedback. A lot of people very excited and happy about the new car, which is wonderful. There's a lot of people out there who are car people as well as tech people, obviously. And there were a few unhappy people, as tends to happen on the internet. And some of those people were unhappy about the dolphins or the trees or the green things, whatever else it may be. And, you know, that's another discussion. I spoke about that last week. And a few people were unhappy that I may be in a position to buy a nice car, which to me seemed an enormously odd thing to want to actually step up and express one's displeasure that someone else may have the choice to buy something that they like. But, you know, it's the internet, people do weird shit. So I was more interested in the people who are very excited about it. And they're like, hey, fantastic, this is motivational, this really drives me to do better at what I do, paraphrasing for them, of course. And so I really wanted to speak about it. And more so than sort of speak about the car, but speak about the sort of the things that lead, the series of events that lead up to having the choice to buy something like this. And it tied perfectly into that blog post, which had been sitting there for ages with all these little notes and things like this and all these ideas I had to try and explain it, which was good. So I wrote this blog post with the intention being to try and share things that people of the same or similar background to me, sort of, you know, coming from tech industry, working as a developer, going through your career, things that you can do to try and amplify your financial potential. Now, this is always going to be a tricky thing, talking about money, and it's an interesting thing. There are a lot of different social tolerances to money. So, for example, there are different views of whether one should express the fact that they may have come across money. You know, should you have a nice car, or should you, I don't know, like drive a beige Camry? If you like beige Camrys, then that's fine. The whole point of this is about being able to have the choice to choose what you like. Anyway, to the issue here around different tolerances and things, it's always going to be tricky. So I put a lot of effort into trying to create something that hopefully speaks to the objectives that everyone has, because not everyone just wants to earn $1 gazillion and buy like a super yacht and a private jet or something. Some people want to give it all to charity. Some people want to focus on their family. Some people want to give it to their local, whatever. I don't care. The point is, and this really sort of starts to get me to the heart of the matter here, is that the idea of working on financial prosperity gives you more choices. So we had the choice to get that car. That's wonderful. Other people have the choice to make massive donations to charity. I mean, in fact, it's interesting. When you look at the top people in our tech industry who are now getting on a bit, people like Bill Gates, he's going, yeah, like I'm just going to give billions and billions of dollars to charity, which is awesome. He has the choice to do that. I do not have the choice to give billions and billions of dollars to charity. It would be a nice choice to have. I don't expect that I'll ever have it. But the point is that you can choose what you do with the money such that it meets your own personal objectives. And here's how to make the world a better place, and good on him for doing that. Now, actually, I'm going to come back to the choices thing, because just looking through this in the order in which I wrote it, I wanted to write something that was relevant to tech people and more centric to tech people, but also still useful for everyone beyond there. And there are things that we have going for us in tech which do give us a massive advantage. One of the big things, and I wonder how much all of us stop to think about this and reflect on it, is that people in tech make a significant amount more money than just about any other industry out there. Now, I pulled some figures here from Seek. It's our largest job market in Australia. They're a massive online service. They do, obviously, lots of analysis of which industries are paying well, which jobs are paying well. And tech was one of the highest paying jobs. I think it was the top 5 highest paying industries. And the top 1 was mining, which in Australia is a little bit weird at the moment because we had this mining boom and a bunch of people were getting paid like 6-figure money to drive a truck. And now that's kind of crashing and that industry's diving. So you can kind of take that out. But basically tech was up there very, very close to the other professions, which were right at the top of the tree. And interestingly, things like legal and medical were quite a way behind it. Now, this is Australian figures, one study by one company. So, obviously things may differ in other places, but isn't it interesting that tech people are getting paid more than, massive generalization coming up, more than doctors and lawyers, or at least their industries. Look, maybe medical includes all the nurses who tend to be underpaid, and then that brings the average down and the doctors are actually doing really well. I don't know. But when you looked at the highest paying role that they had on here, let me find this one because this surprised me. The highest paying role, the highest salary Seek has on its book is for architects. This is software architects at 138,000 Australian dollars a year, which would be about 100,000 US dollars a year, which is interesting, more than like doctors and lawyers and things like this. And that still sort of strikes me. Now, again, you may have different experiences in your local jurisdiction. But wherever you are in the world, it's a pretty safe bet to say that if you're working in the tech industry, you're going to be earning a lot more money than average. That gives you a whole bunch of opportunities to amplify that into something much bigger than what it actually was when you earned it. Now, working through these 10 lessons, the whole thing about choices. So this was lesson number 1. I just mentioned choices. You can go and spend it on a nice car. You can spend it on charitable donations, whatever you want. You can use it to fund more time with your family. We generally only go into offices because we have to. And look, we know there's this whole thing in a very sorry situation about most of us not actually like going into work. I certainly didn't like going into work when I was in a corporate job. I would have much rather stay home and play with my kids. But I had to because I had to earn the money. So certainly one of the things that happens when you have greater access to money and more financial freedom is you get to choose to do things like spend more time with your family. And regardless of how much you do or do not like signs of wealth, most people would go, yeah, it's pretty good if you want to spend more time with your family. And money is the sort of thing that gives you that option. Something that I think a lot of people tend to lose track of is the things, probably the less tangible things, spending the time with the family, things like dealing with medical conditions. So, I wrote in here about how my wife had back surgery a couple of years ago and how much pressure that took off us having the finances to be able to deal with the fact that she couldn't work. She literally would have lost her job if she'd still been back in Sydney in a corporate job. I don't know how it would have worked either. I think they would have just had to come to a mutual agreement that, look, I can't turn up anymore. I don't know if you can just get fired for that, or some pretty shitty stuff happens in corporate jobs. So the choices thing is enormously important. Moving on. And this is really the thing that started me thinking about this early. And of course, I started thinking about this when I was 5 years younger, the blog post that is. This lesson here, number 2, about the money you earn young being the most valuable money you'll ever earn. And really, this is about the value of time amplifying money. And time amplifies money through things like compound interest. So you start to earn interest on the interest that you have already earned, and it amplifies. This is why when you see like dollar amounts invested over time, the graph kind of exponentially goes up because each dollar is amplifying the next dollar. So that's very important. That's something that happens over time. And I got this chart in here from Vanguard that sort of shows, look, 30 years ago, if you had 10 grand and you put it in different asset classes, it would be, for example, it would be $85,000 if you put it into international shares, $206,000 if you put it into US shares, etc., etc. So these things amplify. And you don't just put 10 grand in 30 years ago either. It's something that you contribute to. You know, maybe it's like $100 a month or something. It's little bits, and then over time it amplifies. And I guess what I'm trying to get to here is particularly those of us that are a bit younger. You know, we've all been there if we're not still there already. And we sort of have that choice to start building that now, or the choice to go out via our nicely paid tech jobs and spend it on flat screen TVs and holidays and things like that. So being conscious that early money is just so much more valuable than the late money. And if you are older, I mean, look, I'm early 40s. If you're my age and there's been like 20 years that have already gone past, that money today is going to be much, much more valuable than the money in 10 years from now when you've still got at least another decade to go in your career as well. So getting started on this stuff really early is important. And one of the great things about this industry is that in tech, we have this ability to earn much more money than usual at a young age as well. You know, we don't have to do a 5-year medical degree or something like that. There are a lot of people that come out of university and they make very good money straight off the bat because they've been able to go through and get online experience, demonstrate capability. So a lot of people that drop out of university, such as me, and there are a lot of people that just don't even do any formal education whatsoever in this industry. So they get to start a lot earlier, and this is a really cool advantage that we have in this industry. So, number 3, financial literacy. And it's really interesting to see the comments that came through on this blog post. And a lot of them, whether on the blog post or on the Twitters as well, are very much around recognizing how much gap there is in financial literacy and how important it is. And what we mean by that is, take something like compound interest. Take compound interest on a credit card because credit cards have massive interest rates. Credit card debt is a terrible, terrible debt to have. We'll get back to that in a moment. How many people do you think actually go through school and really properly understand what it means to carry over debt on a credit card? That's financial literacy, like literally seeing the numbers. So that thing that you buy and then you can't pay that debt back before the credit is, or before the debt is due on the card, let's say by the end of the month, and it carries forward, and then there's interest on your interest and you got to pay that back, or if you're only making the minimum payments and you're still carrying debt forward, banks love that. It is not good for your financial prosperity. But how many people understand that? And this is just a massively important thing. And in fact, I lament in this blog post that it's a real shame that this is something that, in my experience at least, wasn't part of the education system. I came out of school and out of university with absolutely no idea, not just how that works, but how all sorts of other constructs around how to manage money actually operate, how to use it efficiently, how to not get yourself into a heap of trouble. And I, like many other people as well, have certainly had debt in the past, which has gotten myself into trouble, which probably shouldn't have been there. That's another blog post altogether. Obviously, I came out of it all right. So the financial literacy thing is really, really important, and it's something that you need to invest time in. And I sort of say in this blog post, look, there's a lot of resources out there. I read heaps of books. I used to get investment magazines every month. I got really, really into that. I would go to conferences and events, and I saw a lot of stuff that frankly was a bit shady as well. This is an industry that attracts rather some really, really dodgy stuff. And you've got to, I guess, develop the awareness of what stacks up and what doesn't. And again, this is a financial literacy thing. And I think it's good to actually see all this stuff. I certainly remember seeing a lot of a lot of real estate sharks, a lot of people selling property that was just massively overvalued and clearly wasn't going to be a good decision in the long term. I saw a lot of that, and I didn't fortunately buy any of that. But seeing it and understanding it and knowing why it was a bad deal was a whole financial literacy thing. So the financial literacy, number 3, very important. Now, going back to a bit I forgot, because I just remembered it when I said property. The bit about starting young. I wanted to share just a little bit about what my wife Kylie and I had done when we were younger, because it's a bit hard to sort of write this and explain where we are now without touching on this. And I linked to a post I put on a forum some years ago about our own property investing. And we started buying real estate when we were quite young. We would have been mid-20s. Maybe that's not quite young, youngish. Seems young in retrospect. And we bought a lot, and we continued to pour in all of the money that we could save into buying more. And just to be clear, I don't necessarily think that this is the right financial strategy for everyone, and we certainly took risks and did things like that. But it helps explain where we've come from. And the point about doing it young is that by starting in, I think about 2002, we had time for that to amplify and grow and to create this sort of solid base of capital and equity, which was then really powerful for all sorts of things later on. Everything from getting more loans because the banks can see that, well, actually, you've actually got some money sitting there. Plus, they're intangible assets that we can come and take if you don't pay your loan back. Banks do like real estate for that reason. Plus, it talks to the fact of how valuable this was, sort of amplifying over time. We still own all the property we bought, and all of that still keeps paying income and still keeps growing in capital, which provides equity, which provides you access to other things. Again, all comes back to financial literacy. Anyway, that was an important point. I needed to mention that. Now, number 4 was around the tax system, and frankly, tax is not very much fun. It's not much fun paying it, and it's not much fun learning about it either, if I'm honest. But it is really, really super important because we all pay it. So we all pay it on the money that we earn, assuming you earn more than a very, very, very small amount. And we also all pay it on goods and services and things like that we buy. We are also, regardless of where you are in the world, all in jurisdictions that have some things that are more tax effective than others. And there are lots of ways of legally reducing the amount of tax you pay. You need to say tax minimization, not tax avoidance. Different thing, whole bunch of different stuff that happens if you do the latter instead of the former. So there are lots of ways, for example, the way that you can contribute to retirement funds. Australia has taxation incentives to contribute to what we call superannuation, which is a little bit of akin to a 401k in the US. I saw other people via their comments say, yeah, look, in the UK or Germany or wherever else, there are incentives by the government to put money into retirement funds, even very young, tax incentives. Not always the right thing to do, but financial literacy, that helps you work out whether it makes sense for you or not. Australia has very attractive incentives for real estate investors, which is why we did what we did when we were younger. So that made a lot of sense for us. And really what this is about is trying to understand how to maximize the dollars that you earn. Because you're going to earn, say, for the sake of simplicity, $100,000 from your employer. And this looks very nice, $100,000. And then they go, yeah, but we got to take a big whack of that off, give it to the tax man. And the trick for you is to sort of say, well, how do we make sure that we don't give any more than what we absolutely need to? So, for example, there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff in your life that is probably tax deductible. Incidentally, none of this constitutes financial advice. Seek independent advice, etc., etc. It should be obvious. I just don't know how serious regulators get when you say stuff like this. But anyway, there will probably be stuff that is tax deductible, things that are costs incurred in the process of doing business, for example. Now, this may also depend on things like, am I a direct employee? Am I a contractor? What is my vehicle structure, if you like, the vehicle that you trade under or operate under? And again, this is in all seriousness a point where you need to get independent advice. But there are a lot of things, certainly that I see in my everyday life, or that I buy in my everyday life, that I use to do my job, that are tax deductible. And in fact, it's going to be most of the stuff that I look around and see here in the office. So understanding these things is really important because it's almost like free money. And again, this amplifies over time. So you get this right now, and then as you get older, that $100 that you saved back then, which didn't seem like much at the time, is worth thousands as time passes by. So the tax effectiveness is a really big one. The next one's debt. Now, this actually took an interesting turn in the comments today. So talk about good debt and bad debt. And I think just this term, good debt, to some people feels very strange. I particularly think it feels strange to older generations who were of a mindset, and this may be a very Australian thing again, but you might find it resonates where you are, probably have a mindset where you should pay down all your debt and you should buy everything with cash, and you should effectively not have liabilities to the bank. Now, there are certainly cases where that's very important, and there are cases where it's less important. So just to be clear, things like bad debt are debt on things which are not moving you forward in life. Maybe that's a good generalization. If you go and buy a very nice LCD TV and you put it on your credit card and you don't pay the credit card off, that's bad debt. The value of the TV goes down, so effectively the equity that you have in it goes into negative because let's say you've borrowed $5,000. So you borrowed $5,000, you owe $5,000, but the value of the TV goes down as soon as you take it out of the showroom. It goes down. And in a way, it kind of doesn't even matter what the capital value of the thing is because you're probably not going to turn around and sell it anyway. So really, the whole thing ultimately is probably going to go down to about zero. See how much money you get trying to get rid of an old TV. I tried this the other day. The answer was about that. Zero, for those of you listening on the podcast. So the point is you've got this thing that was a capital asset that you've paid for, but now it's depreciating very, very quickly, and you're probably never going to get anything back from it, but you've still got this debt. And then if you don't pay it off, then the debt amplifies. You pay more interest, and then you pay interest on your interest. And this is bad debt. It's not moving you forward. Particularly credit cards, you pay very high interest rates on. Payday loans are even worse. Payday loans have massive interest rates. And for those of you not familiar with the term, payday loans tend to be very, very short-term loans where you go to a lender and say, look, for argument's sake, I'm not getting paid until the end of the month. I really need some cash because I've got some bills to pay. And they go, oh, yes, we would like to lend you some money. Let us tell you about our terms. And what ends up happening, I've got an example in here. I took an example of a local Aussie company called Nimble, who are, I'm trying to say this seriously, a mainstream above-board lender. And what I mean by this is that it is effectively like a high street lender that's a very professional organisation. They do operate legally within the guidelines and the terms and the legal constructs of Australian law, but they lend money on a very short basis, normally small amounts, for massive interest rates. So for example, I've got a calculator here. Now, I said, what if I wanted to borrow $2,000 and I want to borrow it for 12 weeks? How much money will you have to pay back if you borrow $2,000 for 12 weeks? You will have to pay a total of $2,640. In other words, you are going to have to pay 32% interest over 12 weeks. Now, if I had to pay 32% interest over a year, that would be terrible. If I had to pay half of that over a year, that would be terrible. So you can see the problem here. Now, change of pace, because this is the point where people could get upset. And I'm going to come back to one person who got upset later on, because it was one of their points. Some people end up in situations, very often through no fault of their own, the circumstances outside of their control, they lose their job, one of the kids gets sick, partner falls pregnant and they can't work, whatever else it may be, where they are under financial duress. And this becomes their only option. And it must be an absolute shitty time for them because they're left with this one option, which is to go and borrow money from like a loan shark with a nice suit. And this is all they have. I'm not trying to be negative or derogatory about people who find themselves in that situation. What I would say, though, is that I just really hope people understand the impact of this. Like, this should be an absolute worst case scenario to go and get a payday loan because you are going to pay through the nose to pay it back. So for those people who do find themselves in that situation, at the very least, develop enough financial literacy to understand what that really means. And that may even change your approach to it a little bit. If it was me, I'd probably much rather go hand in hand and beg to family and friends for money than go to a payday lender. So That's the bad debt. Now, the good debt is debt which is an investment. It will actually pay you back what you borrow, the interest you pay, and more on top of that. So, for example, buying real estate is a good example. With the exception of real estate that goes down in value. Now, I do talk about this in the blog post. There are exceptions here. But for the most part, let's say we'll do the sort of traditional family thing. Australia is very big on owning your own home. They call it the Great Australian Dream. So someone goes out, they get a 30-year loan. They're going to pay, let's say for argument's sake, 5% interest a year. It'll go up and down over the next 30 years. They're going to be paying interest. They're going to be gradually chipping away at the loan, paying it down. They have borrowed money, but the value of the place they're living in is going up and up and up and up over time. And I know people pop up and go, well, in 2008, the US property market went down. Yes, it did, and it bounces back, and all of these things happen. And for long enough terms, these things tend to even out. Do your own research, not financial advice. Now, the point here is that from a good debt perspective, this does become a long-term investment. The other thing is, I did make the point here, one thing about property in general, and particularly for those buying their own home, is it does become a bit of a forced savings plan. And certainly this is something the government here is very conscious of. If a family goes out and rents a place, they're just going to keep paying money over and over and over again each month, and they're not going to have anything to show at the end of it other than the fact they've been paying money. They've saved on paying the deposit, which they would otherwise pay to buy their own home. But if they go out and spend that on a nice TV, not so good. So one of the things about actually having a loan on a property and having to pay it down is that it does force you to save money over time and build equity. Now, there are all sorts of other discussions around that, including some discussions in the comments. So please, before someone listens to this and then jumps on and says, oh, I listened to this and I was completely wrong, do have a read of the post in the comments. Good debt, I have also said, would include things like borrowing for education. So we have things like HECS in Australia, our Higher Education Contribution Scheme, I think is the acronym. Been a long time since I've had a HECS debt, but both Kylie and I did have a HECS debt because we went to university. Certainly our parents didn't just pay for us to go. We had to go and borrow money from the government. And then as you start working, you pay it down. But clearly that is an investment in your education. And your education is then something that pays off over time because hopefully it helps you get a better job and earn more money. And eventually what seems like a very large student debt does end up getting paid down and hopefully is a good long-term investment. So, point again being, that is good debt. Now, there are a few little edge cases here. So things like, we have had cases in the past where we've bought a car, which we could sort of go two ways with. Do you pay cash for the car, or do you go and borrow money from the manufacturer? And there are times where we've seen the manufacturer offer very attractive rates. Yet sometimes much less than what we'd earn on the money if we went and invested it. So there have been times where it's like, look, it actually makes sense to borrow money for a depreciating asset because the cost of that money is actually less than effectively the cost of the money if we went and did something else with it. Again, financial literacy, we keep coming back to that point. So that was an important one too. And there's a little side note I just noticed here at the end of this post saying, look, around things like understanding debt and financial literacy and all this sort of stuff, writing stuff down. So having, whether it's a spreadsheet or using an online service to help you manage your finances, is super, super important. And I bet that most people have very little idea of what they actually spend, what their net worth is, what their liabilities are. Like, do you actually have all of this information together? Do you have a clear picture? Do you know what you're saving each month? So, yeah, things like this are really, really important. Now, number 6, diversifying earning potential and risk. Now, this was a little bit tricky because on the one hand, it's easy for me to talk about this now when I have independence and multiple income streams. But on the other hand, it's very important to talk about this and think about this when you don't, because this is what helps reduce your risk and maximize your potential. One of the things that I don't mean to get into relationship advice here, but one of the things that was actually very good for us in diversification was actually having a partner. Like Kylie had a good job, she earned money. I had a good job, I earned money. And between us, if we had have lost one of those jobs, we'd still have like two of us in one good job, as opposed to if I was on my own and I lost it and now there's just no good jobs, like there's no job of any kind whatsoever. So, that was actually kind of important. Now, I also think, sort of going back to this as well, I've got a meeting soon. The problem now is I'm so much in holiday mode, I've completely forgotten about the fact that sometimes I have things like meetings. So this might even be a two-part recording. Anyway, so the thing is, like, going back to this as well, I've also said, look, as part of diversification, thinking about things like how you diversify your expertise and how you reduce your risk as a result. So things like, any of you can go out and become more marketable. I link to my Hack Your Career course, where I talk about the importance of building public profile and having the ability to walk into a job interview and be presentable and marketable. In fact, I shared how I'd had a little pet project. I built a little classic ASP website, not ASP.NET, ASP website, with an Access database. I know, let's get over it. And that was a project that I showed when I went for the job interview at Pfizer in 2001. And I don't know how important that was as part of the interview, but I had something here that allowed me to go in and say, hey, look at this, I've done this thing and I've built this thing. And they went, wow, this is cool. Like this guy actually has some capability. At least we've seen something he's built. So as part of reducing risk, being marketable is massively, massively important. The diversifying earnings, it's harder when you have a normal job. But as I said in here, even when I was working for Pfizer, I still did little projects for friends. Now, your place of work may even prohibit you from doing that. So, and frankly, that's another issue to discuss what they do. But that worked for me. So there are lots of little things where I could make a little bit of change on the side, and then we'd pour that into the investment. And then, of course, the value of money over time kicked in, and now it's turned into much bigger things. I started doing Pluralsight while I was working at Pfizer. So by the time I left Pfizer, my corporate job in an architect role, which remember is the good paying one, and I'd been in, I guess I had 15 years plus of industry experience by then as well. It was earning very good money. Pluralsight was earning twice as much money because I'd sat at home in my spare time, in my nights and my weekends and my holidays and built that, and that then became this sort of income producing asset. So that's a really, really important thing to keep in mind. There are opportunities to diversify earnings, and if not through ways like that, then through investments. And it might be really small, you might save up $1,000 for argument's sake, and you manage to spread $1,000 across a few shares or a managed fund, and then it starts to pay over time. So that is especially important, this diversification thing. It's kind of funny, but like when you look at the way it works for most of us, and again, putting myself in that same boat for many years as well, is that we go into the job each day and we exchange our time for money. And then as soon as we stop doing that, you don't make money anymore. And that's the way it works the vast majority of the time. But you can see the risk that creates as well. And I talk in that blog post about seeing people around me get redundancies, and then the impact on them as they got that redundancy and they realized that now they didn't have a job and suddenly there's no more money. So that was that one. Now, I like this next one. In fact, this next one was one of the first things I put in there. Number 7, prepare for luck. Now, I wanted to reference Malcolm Gladwell's book. And actually I had someone in a comment somewhere go, this guy's a fraud, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Read the books. The books are super, super interesting. So Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called The Tipping Point. Many people are probably very familiar with that term. He also wrote one called Blink. I think Blink was the first one of his books I read, and it would have been maybe 12 years ago. And I read it and I just found it absolutely fascinating about how we make decisions very, very quickly based on the way we've been conditioned over time. And there's some really, really insightful things in there. And then the one that I've referred to here is Outliers. And the byline of Outliers is the story of success. And what he does is he sort of looks at people that have been really successful in one field or another and tries to establish what are the drivers and the patterns for that. And I've got an example in here where he talks about hockey players. He said, look, there's these Canadian hockey players. And he said, when they kind of looked at the Canadian hockey players, an abnormally large number of them were born towards the start of the year rather than towards the end of the year. And he believes the reason is, and this seems to make sense, is he says if whether you're born in January or born in December, when you get put in with all your other classmates of the same age, everyone goes in, and there could be up to 1 year difference between the age of kids, but you're all in the same group. You're all competing against each other. And particularly for those of you with kids, think about how much kids develop over the period of a year. So my son's playing very competitive tennis, and I look at him sometimes over the period of a few weeks, and there's like a massive difference. If I put like the 9-year-old version of him now up against the 8-year-old version, he'd smash the 8-year-old version. But he would be considered in the same group. And then if scouts or coaches or anything come along and look at the kids and they go, well, who are we going to pick to develop further? Who has potential? Well, it's probably going to be the older kid. So this kid gets this unfair, unnatural advantage just by virtue of the month that they're born. Now, of course, you might be in another part of the world and it's going to be like 1 July through to 30 June, and it's a different set of dates. But the point is that it's really interesting to look at what it is that actually contributes to success. And the macro observation from this particular lesson here is that we all have luck. So, for example, I made the point here that we know that this is a very white male-dominated industry. So I am lucky in terms of those attributes, and I was also lucky in terms of other attributes. So I spent a good whack of my teenage years living in Singapore. And Singapore was a very tech-centric hub then. So this is now early 90s. And I had access to technology that I would not have had if my parents hadn't moved me around the world. And believe me, I wasn't real happy about that at the time. But it did work out well. So I had access to luck. But the thing is that when Gladwell talks about everything from the hockey players through to people like Bill Gates and the Beatles and this sort of thing, is that it wasn't just luck. There had to be something, some ability, some skill to then take that and turn it into something else. So the hockey players, you could be the youngest kid, or let's say the oldest kid in the class. That doesn't automatically make you awesome. You have to have this amazing athletic ability. Obviously, Bill Gates is a smart bloke. He didn't just get lucky because his mother worked at Stanford or somewhere like that, but had access to computers and he got to sit there and play with the computers. It wasn't just that luck, it's that when he got there and he sat down at the PC, he actually did something amazing. So the point I'm trying to make here with preparing for luck is that you have to be able to make the most of these opportunities that come along. Now, some of us are going to have more luck than others. Absolutely no doubt about that. But you don't really have a lot of control over that. And there's, again, I'll come back to a comment later on. Someone was a little bit unhappy about some of the luck that I'd had. I was like, dude, this is here. Like, this is the luck that presents itself. Now it's up to you, because a lot of people are going to ignore that or not maximize it. It's up to you whether you have the financial literacy to make the most of it, whether you're prepared for the fact that this lucky job interview pops up. All of these other things which are predicated on actually being able to do something with luck when it presents itself. So there's a comment in it. I always like this comment. This comment, and the attribution of this comment is hazy at best. This comment says, it's not a comment, it's a quote. This quote, "I'm a great believer in luck. The harder I work, the more of it I seem to have." That's a great quote. The reason I think it's a great quote is it recognizes that there is luck, but it also recognizes that it's not luck alone. And I really hate it. And sometimes I think we say this just because it's like a normal common term in English language as well. But I hate it when someone says, "Oh, your life today is very good. Gee, you're lucky." So, well, yes, there is a portion of that, but that statement seems to imply that I just fronted up one day and then everything landed in your lap. That's generally not how it works, unless you like inherit billions or something like that. It's a combination of the luck and the hard work. And when someone says, "Gee, you're lucky," it tends to neglect the fact that, yeah, but there's a huge amount of work that went into actually being able to do something with the luck. Number 8, put a price on your time and your family. People hate this. They hate the premise that their family could have a value. And they go, what do you mean? Like, my family's priceless. I can't put a price on my kids. There's no price on my kids. Bye, kids, I'm going to work today. That's what you just did. You literally just said, hey, I'm going to leave you here and I'm going to go into my office and I'm going to do my job. And again, I did this for many, many years. I still do this today. I say, hey, bye, kids. I'm going off to the other side of the world to go to a conference or something like that. So we all do this. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that you've got to be conscious about what the value of your time is. Now, I gave an example here. I said, look, I used to play a lot of Half-Life. And yeah, many people listening to this probably spend a lot of time in front of the Xbox or something equivalent to that. And this is fine. This is good fun. But are you conscious of what that takes you away from? It's almost like, are you conscious of the opportunity loss of doing this? And the penny that dropped for me is that every time I sat down there, let's say for a couple of hours, and I went around like just fragging anything that moved, that was a couple of hours that I wasn't using to invest, to increase my skills by learning or doing something. Like it was a couple of hours that, by any reasonable definition, could have been used a lot better. Now, I also don't want to sort of say that you should never have any fun, you know. And for those of you who see my tweets and my photos with jet skis and things like that, you will know that that is certainly not the way I think. But I guess the point here is to be conscious about when I go and do that. Like it's almost like, what is the holistic cost of doing this? It's going to take me away from doing something else. But maybe in the case of going for a blast on the jet ski, it's going to clear my head. It's going to get me away from this. It's going to give me, you know, very often in my case, 30 to 60 minutes of just get away from everything else and allow me to sort of feel like I've lived a bit and then come back and get back into things. So have a really good think about that. When you're partaking in these activities, what is that cost to you? Number 9, I kind of dropped this in a little bit later because the penny only dropped as I was writing the post. And it particularly only dropped as I saw this video of Arnold Schwarzenegger. So Arnold Schwarzenegger's got this video, and it's a speech, and it's really fragments from a speech where he talks about having a goal. And obviously he's a guy who achieved some pretty amazing things. And he talks about how important it was to have the goal, in his case, to be Mr. Universe. You know, like this is his goal. And it was, let's be fair, that was a massive goal, particularly given his background and everything as well. But by having that goal, it kept him focused. And the words he used here, which I've then repeated as well, is that without a goal, you do tend to drift. It's like, well, I'm comfortable. We're just going day by day, la, 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 everything's nice. And maybe you're happy with that. That's fine. But if you do want for bigger things, then you've got to know where you're going to go. There's got to be something that you're focused on and you're driving towards. I embedded a tweet here from just over 3 years ago of when we moved from Sydney to the Gold Coast. I embedded a tweet. It's a photo of the house we live in now. And it is a very nice looking house. And this was our goal. Our goal was to get out of Sydney and move to the Gold Coast. And for many, many, many years, probably for 15 years, like this was the goal. This was the goal we're focused on. And it took a long time to get there and all the sacrifices and things along the way. But that was the end goal, and it was enormously fulfilling to actually get there as well. So, have a goal and avoid drifting. I'm going to pause this video here because I do actually have to go and have a meeting, and then I'm going to come back and continue on with lesson number 10. All right, so I wasn't the only one that turned up to that meeting having forgotten until just beforehand that there was a meeting, and I think this is probably just the sign of the time of the year. So anyway, look, let's move on past that because I do want to sort of wrap up this blog post, talk about a couple more things on that, and then talk about the other one as well. So the 10th lesson I got to here was around partnership. And many of you listening to this probably are in a relationship, and the decisions that you make around your financial prosperity are decisions that really do impact both of you. And they're decisions that are very, very hard to make on your own. And really the crux of my point here is that for Kylie and myself, we spend a lot of time, we did very, very early on, as well as today, spend a lot of time talking about what is it that we want out of life, what is it that we want to do with our money. If we want to be really, really focused on saving and investing, then we do that together. If we want to spend it on luxuries in life, then we do that together. And we make sure that these are joint decisions and joint visions. And I'm sure that you have probably seen in your life, as we certainly have in ours, couples in the past where they're not on the same wavelength. I could easily imagine someone who likes cars the way I do having a very unhappy relationship if their partner did not support that. I've seen other people that, let's say, are very into high-end fashion, and that's fine. But if you're very into high-end fashion and then your partner thinks it's a waste of money, then you're probably not going to have a very harmonious relationship. So I reckon this is super, super important, because at the end of the day, like, if you can go and make all the money in the world, but if you come home and your home life is an absolute misery, then you're probably not going to be having a very good time of it. So I think that's a massively important thing, and I've certainly reflected on that in the past as well, in talks such as that Hack Your Career one that I mentioned before, where I've had to sort of make these decisions in partnership with my wife to make sure that we are aligned and we have the same view, because things just get really, really off track very, very quickly with that. The other thing is, and hopefully this comes throughout the blog post, and I did mention it earlier on as well, is that being in a partnership does give you some enormously good leverage in terms of financial prosperity. So I mentioned earlier, if for example I wasn't working but she still was, well, we'd still have some money. The other thing is that when you take two people earning money and then you add that together, it doubles. Let's say, for sake of simplicity, you're earning the same amount of money. Okay, now it doubles. Your expenses do not double with that. You live in the same house or apartment or whatever together. There's a bunch of stuff where you get economies of scale on the money that you spend. So a partnership is actually a very financially prosperous strategy. Don't get divorced. I believe that becomes a very, very expensive thing. And I know someone's probably going to get upset with that, because they go, what if I have a bad relationship? That aside, I guess that the point here is that things like marital disputes and separations, etc., are financially not so good. One thing that I didn't touch on in the blog post, and I kind of almost wish that I had it, but I think I sort of did a little bit implicitly, and I in fact I added it in one of the comments, is opportunity cost of money. And this is the premise that when you take money and you do something with it, there is something else that you cannot do with it. So for argument's sake, if you go and buy that TV, you're going and buying the TV, you can now no longer invest that money somewhere else because you bought the TV with it. And one of the big things that I always found, and this is also part of the financial literacy bit, is that in planning what we're going to do with money, you have to sort of almost say, like, what is the highest and best use of it? So I could do this, but then I couldn't do that. Now, whether that's investing the money or going on a holiday or something like that, it's very important. If you're going to go and spend $1,000 on something, it's not just the $1,000 that you're spending on that it's costing you. It's the fact that $1,000 could have, for argument's sake, earned 5% a year, or could have been leveraged into buying something else, which then would have appreciated at 5%. Then you get the leverage and everything else. So the whole opportunity cost thing is actually important too. That might be something for a follow-up if I find that this continues to resonate with people and there's actually enough material for follow-up. Couple of final things on this. One really interesting thread that's come through, and I haven't even read all the replies just yet in the comments, is that in the US, it looks like effectively having credit cards is good for your credit rating. The US, the US in many ways is different to other parts of the world. And one of the things that we actually found in Australia is that when you have a credit card, let's say you got a credit card and you've got a $10,000 limit on it. When you have a credit card and you go to borrow money for a property, the bank looks at the credit card with the $10,000 limit and says, we're going to add $10,000 effectively to your debt when we assess your serviceability. So they're going to look at you and go, this bloke already owes 10 grand. Because at the drop of a hat, you could suddenly owe 10 grand because the bank has effectively already approved you to borrow that money. So one of the things we always did, and still do to this day, is have arbitrarily low credit card limits to make sure that when a bank looks at your serviceability, say for argument's sake, it's a $5,000 limit instead of a $10,000 limit, because that effectively reduces your on-paper debt by 5 grand. The theme that came through in the US is the fact that there are credit scores there. We don't have credit scores in Australia. We have credit records. You can go to a company like Equifax and get your credit record, which will show all the loans you've taken, any credit inquiries, any defaults or things like that you have on your account. But we don't have a score per se. And it sounds like in the US, and a few people said it's the same in the UK, there is this concept of a credit score, and you increase your credit score by having, if not necessarily more debt, the opportunity to accrue debt and to demonstrate that you have not done so over a long period of time. I'm gonna reply to this thread probably after this video and drop in one of the comments from someone on Twitter, because basically the comment was made on the blog post and I went, oh, this sounds really weird, and I went to the Twitters and said, hey, what's the story? And everyone was like, yeah, this is how it is. Someone in the comment thread sort of said, look, this is definitely not the way in Europe, and this, I forget the wording, but it's like, this tends to be because obviously banks like you to borrow money because then they make more money out of it. It feels kind of weird, and I replied to someone earlier on. I said, so basically it's like this is post-GFC, where one of the things we learned is that people had way too much debt. And we're saying it's actually good to have debt or to be in a position to suddenly accrue debt, because that will show that you're financially responsible. Anyway, it is how it is. And this is sort of goes back to the financial literacy point, where clearly, if you're in the US, that is something that you need to understand, and that you need to figure out how to use that system to then have a good credit rating, because you're going to need a good credit rating in order to borrow money for things like investments. We also need to understand that in a place like Australia, or much of Europe as it seems, it works very differently. And the things that actually make for a good credit rating here are quite different to those in another place. Now, I was amazingly surprised at how positive all the feedback was. Like, this is one of these blog posts, honestly, I thought it could have gone either way. It could have gone the way that it has, where it's been received very well. It could have gone the way where people got cranky because they've seen that I've made money or been successful or whatever it else. It's the internet, people get cranky. Up until about a day and a half ago, I was running at 100% positive, which is a bit of a freaking miracle if I'm honest. And to date, now remember I posted this on New Year's Eve, so I'm now 4 days in. To date, there is one negative comment. I'm not going to link to the comment. In fact, it's a tweet. I'm not going to link to it because I don't want to like proverbially throw the guy under the bus. People will find it if they want to find it. I'm just going to read parts of it because I do want to touch on it, because I've personally thought this was clear in the blog post anyway. Maybe the bloke just hasn't read it. But it's important. So this guy replies to my original tweet, which has been liked 1,100 times now. Says, not everyone is fortunate enough to start purchasing investment properties in their 20s. Let's start with that. Now, I have spoken about the fortune thing. And there are several things here. So first of all, certainly, again, if you're not inheriting $1 billion or something, fortune tends to be made as opposed to just organically received by the magic of the gods. Like, you know, this was the whole thing about the harder I work, the luckier I become. So this whole thing about being fortunate in their 20s, we worked in the industry. Well, I worked in the tech industry. Carly worked in the property industry. We worked in the industry. As I said in the blog post, we weren't given any money. We weren't even given any guarantees by parents or anything like that. We actually had to save every single cent. We went out there and did that by working in mainstream corporate jobs, particularly for my industry, which pays a lot of money. So that is how it happens, not by fortune, but because you go out there and you actually work your ass off. I have a feeling there is a sentiment amongst people, and I did touch on tall poppy syndrome as well, right at the start of this blog post. There's almost a feeling there, which is that, yeah, look, you have somehow had all good fortune fall in your lap, and this hasn't taken hard work, and it's enormously frustrating. They go on, and people often take payday loans not out of illiteracy, but our lack of other options. Now, actually, I'll just pick this point up because he said our lack of other options. So I wonder if this is someone that has been taking payday loans. Now, just to be really clear here, I did make the point here and said, look, I totally get that some people, in fact, I'll tell you exactly what I said. I know that many people are under financial duress and may not have other options. The point is to understand what the actual impact of this debt really is. So this is not to be critical about people that need those loans. I touched on that before. But it's to understand what it means. Now, for this bloke, if he is taking payday loans, for whatever reason, then so be it. This is not to say you're a bad person for taking a payday loan. It is to say understand that you're paying a huge amount of interest. And if there is anything whatsoever you can do, even using your credit card, paying nearly 20% per annum is much better than paying 32% over the period of 12 weeks. So long as you can develop financial literacy to understand the impact and try and find alternatives, then that's fine. That wasn't enough. There was a follow-up tweet. This bloke says, I respect your experience and admire your success. You know there's going to be something coming. But your post screams, I'm rich. You're also saying you can be too, but still not everyone is lucky and fortunate, as well as entitled and privileged as you appear to be. Now, you know what, I'll grant him on part of this. Not everyone is lucky and fortunate. And as I said earlier on, I have had good luck, whether that may be from my race to my gender to the country I was born in to the country I got to live in as a kid due to the decisions my parents made, much to my own unhappiness. That's a whole other blog post another time. So there are definitely things that happened to me that were outside of my control. But I also look at a whole bunch of other people that were in a very similar situation. I look at people that I went to school with, for example, when I was living in Singapore, that were born into the same sorts of households that mine was. And they have very often ended up in very, very different positions in their life. And I want to reiterate the point that there is good fortune that befalls all of us. And the question then is what you do with it, because good fortune alone is not enough to do the things that we have done over the last couple of decades. I continue to get this feeling as entitled and privileged as you appear to be. It just feels like people like to look for excuses, you know? And again, like I know nothing about this bloke other than what's here in 2 tweets. And again, it is also the only single negative one I've received. People seem to like to look for excuses as to why their lot in life is not where they want it to be. Now, maybe the guy's perfectly happy, and that's fantastic. And again, the whole point of this was not to say go out and make loads of money. It's to like give yourself options in life. But I still am mystified as to the desire for some people to stand up and express how unhappy they are with your happiness. You know, it's like it does seem to come back to money, though, because I was going to say, look, there are times where obviously I post photos of beer or beaches or things like that. We don't normally have people pop up and say, look, I'm really unhappy with beer, or I'd rather you not express that. But if it's like, here is a car or something I like, people pop up and say, I am unhappy that you have had the option to buy this and that you have then shared this part of your life with other people. So anyway, honestly, this really, it doesn't bug me, the fact that there's been a negative comment, and like I say, I'm kind of surprised that there's not a lot more. I think it more bugs me that there is an attitude here that just doesn't want to, want to recognize that things like this don't just fall in your lap, and also want to recognize that everybody has opportunities that they can take in life. And particularly for those of us in this industry, and based on this guy's profile, he is in this industry, you are, for want of a better term, in an enormously privileged position by working in tech. And to sort of close this out again, because I do want to end it on a very positive note, this is the reality of the industry we're in. I mean, not only is it a fantastically paying industry, it's one that you can get involved in very young. It's one you can do remotely in many cases. It's one that has many different online opportunities, and then heaps of opportunities to work for all sorts of amazing companies around the world as well. So for those of you in tech, you are in an absolutely fantastic position in the right industry at the right time. Like I look at Australia, we, over the last couple of years, have just finished all our car manufacturing. Australia had a really strong car culture. Don't build anything in Australia anymore. And there's a lot of people in that industry that are out of work because manual labour jobs in Australia, like in many other first world countries, have declined massively. But where we're growing and where we're really strong is in these knowledge worker sort of jobs, things like the tech industry. So it's a fantastic industry to be in. And I'm very excited about being here. And I really, really hope that this blog post helps those of you in this industry amplify and do better things with the great investment that you've made in your skills and your choice of career. Right, let's leave it there because that's very positive. So I want to talk about one more thing. And I don't even know how long I've been going now because I had to stop and start the video. But it's my retrospective. So I did my 2018 retrospective, which I've been doing for the last few years now. Not always the 2018 one, obviously. But I've done the retrospective since I've had independence. And, just to sort of rush through this one a bit quicker, being conscious of time, my travel was actually almost identical to the year before. I did I think the same number of trips, but another 15,000 kilometers of flying over another 17 hours and 3 more flights than last year. So there was a lot more, there was a few more travel. So my travel went up, 4 days over the previous year, but 52 days were either with both my wife and kids or with just Kylie and myself. She came to Texas with me. So that's cool, right? It's actually, it's travel can get lonely. So I'm very happy about that as a change. Blogging was interesting because my biggest blogs were actually blogs written in 2017, but because they're referenced in Have I Been Pwned in breaches that people keep finding themselves in, and Have I Been Pwned's gotten so big that my most popular blogs were actually the ones that were written the year before. Outside of that, the Pwned Password blog post looks like it was the biggest one of the year. Probably the surprising large one was the pie hole one. People love the pie hole. And then the one I liked the most was the New Year's Eve one, the one we've just been discussing. So I was very happy with that blog post. Speaking was that was kind of crazy. I actually went through and searched my Twitter for media references of me in different places, and I just embedded tweets in the different places I was at. Copenhagen, Seattle, Vegas, Melbourne, yay. Sorry, Melbourne people. Sydney, Hawaii, London, Sydney again, Sydney, Melbourne, Sydney, Gold Coast, yay, Texas, more Texas, and a whole bunch of other stuff. You can spin through these. As I said in the sort of the opening intro to this blog post, I think reflecting on what you have done over the period of the year is always a good thing. Whether you're doing what I'm doing or whether you're doing something completely different, it's always sort of good to go, okay, well, look, what have we done? And yes, you can do this at any time, but we tend to be a little bit more reflective as we roll over onto Jan 1. So there was a bunch of stuff there. I declined 76 events, which is one more than last year. So I keep track of all the events I say no to, because every now and then the planets align and I can actually be in a place at a certain time and get back in touch with them. So that was interesting. I noticed, I was just looking at my events calendar now, and I think I have declined 36 events for this year already. So maybe I'll beat 76. Projects, I did Why No HTTPS, which has gone really well. I think most people know what that is. It's linked in here. I did HTTPS's Easy. Super, super happy with that one. Also been translated into 19 different languages, which was pretty cool by the community. Have I Been Pwned, which I talk about all the time, so there's probably not much new there, other than some of the numbers. So 76 new data breaches in 2018, 829 million additional records. Now that actually sounds like a large number, but the year before was billions. So are we getting better? No. I think you just had less massive credential stuffing lists that I loaded. 445,000 new subscribers. So there's 2.2 million something subscribers now. I sent 1.2 billion breach notification emails to them. Sorry, 1.2 million. Did I say billion? 1.2 million. Then another 239,000 of those monitoring domains. Those numbers also are just for breaches. They don't include the pace, which were probably going to be hundreds of thousands more. So at least 1.5 million emails sent by Have I Been Pwned. UK government on board, Australian government on board, Spanish government on board, helping the Estonian police with some cool stuff, partnering with 1Password, integrating into both 1Password and Firefox, and I made stickers. And I've finally got the sticker on my laptop too. So I'm very, very happy to now have 1Password. I do have 1Password actually there. Plus to also have I Been Pwned sticker on the laptop, which is cool. So happy about that. Pwned Passwords went really big because I got to version 2 of that, which did the K-anonymity implementation. Cloudflare did awesome stuff on that. I've got Jannard Ali standing there with myself in San Fran in front of a wall of lava lamps, which was pretty cool. Also an interesting piece here about why Cloudflare uses lava lamps, because they use it as a source of entropy to go into random number generation as part of their crypto stuff, which is pretty cool. Pwn passwords started being used by big organizations. EVE Online, for example, uses Pwn passwords every time people create accounts on there. Okta built in a super cool extension as well. So there's an extension you can use for, I believe, Chrome and Firefox as well, which checks if your password has been in a data breach when you're signing up. GitHub rolled it in, so you sign into GitHub, it is checking Pwn passwords to see if you have actually used a bad password somewhere. The API does about 4 to 6 million queries a month, and in good weeks, I've got about a 99% cache hit ratio, which is pretty cool. So that's neat. Report URI went really well. I've got a figure in here. So Report URI being the project that Scott started and then I invested in 2017, and now we run together. 10.8 billion reports in a month. Now that's a good number. So that service is growing a lot. We're getting in a lot of subscribers as well. So that's growing really quickly. We've also listed at the bottom of the page some of the big subscribers that are on there at the moment. So you see everything from like banks to big web assets to loads and loads of names that you recognize now using Report URI, which is super cool. Awards, super good year. Like I don't get any awards before last year. I mean, other than like the MVP stuff and things. All those ones where it's like some website says that you are a top influencer. Yay, here's a logo to put on your page. Maybe not. But real proper awards. So I got the AusCert Award for Information Security Excellence, literally 15 minutes walk that way, which was cool. Then the week after, I was in London. I got the Grand Prix prize for Best Overall Security Blog, which was super cool. That's one of the trophies that you can see, for those of you watching, on the shelf behind me just there. Then a few hours later, while Scott and I are at another awards, the European, no, that was the other one. This was the SC Awards event. Report URI got the Best Emerging Tech Award as well. So that was just super cool. MVP renewed, regional director status renewed, and that was all. So that's probably why you get to the end of the year and you feel so damn tired as well. But that was just a super, super cool year on the award stuff as well. And look, awards, you don't directly get money or stuff like that. And I say directly because sometimes it raises your profile and then say with Report URI, gives Report URI more exposure. Other companies see it and they go, wow, actually it's a serious deal. But they're just enormously fulfilling, say for the blogging thing, because it is like independent recognition of something that you've been pouring your heart and soul into. So they were really, really nice awards to have, and I'm very grateful for people that voted or nominated or ultimately made decisions. So that's it for this one. I appreciate this did go on for a little bit. I know that the finance one I spent quite a bit of time on, but it obviously really has resonated with people. I am very happy to answer people's questions as well. If you do want to comment on that blog post, there's some very good ones in there already. And then the last thing is the last sponsorship I have on the cards for DigiCert. So DigiCert is sponsoring my blog this week. They're talking about quantum computing spelling the end of RSA and elliptic curve cryptography, which is actually a very interesting topic. As quantum computing hits, it is going to fundamentally change the way that we have to do our crypto things. So DigiCert is linking through to a piece on that in this week's sponsorship. Next week is an all-new sponsor who we're going to be seeing a lot of over the next 6 months, but I'm going to save that surprise until midday GMT Sunday is when it will automatically roll over to the next one. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this has been useful. I know it's been long, but again, I just thought that finance stuff really needed sort of a little bit more personal embellishment. Thanks, guys. See you next week.